The Galactic Council Chamber was a monument to bureaucratic anxiety. All sweeping curves and spotless chrome designed to make everyone feel small and very sorry they'd bothered showing up. Ambassador Celeste Gray sat at the human delegation's laughably tiny desk, watching 7 different alien species argue about who was least qualified to die horribly. The mathematical probability of mission success remains extremely low, dismally so, to be honest, droned Counselor Helix, his gray Nayari skin flickering with stress patterns. We cannot justify the resource expenditure, and I don't see any species lining up to take on the mission. Anyone we've reached out to has refused the mission.
Cannot justify?
Prime Minister Quenvix's marble-pale face managed to look even more constipated than usual.
The Yarvok Syndicate will detonate their quantum destabilizer in 72 hours. The Central Galactic Net will collapse. Banking, defense grids, communication, everything dies.
The amphibious Ulashi representative, Counselor Silvara, raised one elegant webbed hand with diplomatic grace.
Perhaps we could negotiate.
You can't negotiate with fanatics, growled the Corvin military attaché, his horned head lowering like a bull ready to charge. But neither can we spare a full battle fleet. The outer rim conflicts have stretched our forces thin. The human Celeste had been listening to this circular firing squad for 3 hours. She checked her antique Earthwatch, a gift from her grandmother that the aliens found charmingly primitive, and decided it was time to earn her diplomatic salary.
I have a proposal,
she said, her voice cutting through the multilingual bickering like a plasma torch through tissue paper. The chamber fell silent, with a special kind of quiet that meant someone was about to suggest something deeply stupid.
We send humans,
Celeste said, her voice echoing through the chamber. The silence stretched. Then, Helix's head tentacles twitched in what passed for Nayari laughter.
Humans, your species has been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries. You lack the technological sophistication, the strategic discipline, the what?
Celeste's smile could have powered a small moon.
The ability to follow rules, the good sense to calculate odds before acting, the wisdom to know when something can't be done.
Minister Quenvix's pale features managed to grow paler.
Ambassador Gray, surely you're not suggesting...
I'm suggesting we send exactly the kind of people you'd never send. Misfits, criminals even. Look, everyone else has refused the mission. And if we make them an offer we can't refuse, the success rate of the mission is likely to go up exponentially.
She pulled out a datapad with theatrical flair.
Therefore, I have a list of criminals with backgrounds fitting of the mission.
Cell Block D of the Titan Correctional Facility orbited Europa like a very expensive, very secure jewelry box. Inside, Captain Ronan Holt was teaching a Corvin arms dealer how to play poker using improvised cards made from nutrition bar wrappers.
The first thing about bluffing,
Ronan explained, examining his hand with the casual confidence of a man who'd once stolen a Federation dreadnought on a dare, is that it's not about the cards. It's about selling a story the other guy wants to believe. You gotta make him want to believe it, even if it means his loss. Ronan smirked. The Corvin's bovine features twisted in concentration. That sounds asinine. Statistical analysis clearly indicates... Statistical analysis can kiss my ass, Ronan grinned, pushing his pile of commissary credits forward. I'm all in. That's when the guards showed up. 20 minutes later, Ronan found himself in interview room C, facing a woman in a crisp diplomatic uniform who looked like she could negotiate the surrender of a black hole.
Captain Holt?
Celeste Gray said, sliding a file across the table.
How would you like to commit some crimes for the good of the galaxy?
Ronan leaned back in his chair, the restraints clinking softly.
Depends. Are we talking about the fun kind of crimes? Or the boring kind, where I fill out paperwork afterward?
The kind where you probably die horribly. But if you don't, you get full pardons and enough credits to buy your own moon.
Well, damn. You certainly don't ask for much, do you?
Ronan's grin was sharp enough to cut glass, and laced with a love of violence.
What's the catch?
The Yarvok Syndicate is about to murder civilization as we know it. We need someone stupid enough to stop them.
Celeste shrugged.
You seem to be the man for the job.
Ronan laughed.
Ha ha! Lady, you just made my day.
Assembling the rest of the team took 18 hours and required bribing 3 different prison wardens. But Celeste had learned long ago that the impossible was just the improbable wearing a disguise. Della Knox was extracted from solitary confinement, where she'd been placed after hacking the prison's food dispensers to serve nothing but chocolate cake for a week. She was small, dark-haired, with eyes that missed nothing. She could dismantle and probably rebuild a starship with some paper clips and some creatively placed tape.
You broke into the Ulashi Royal Archives, Celeste said, reviewing her file. With kitchen appliances. Yep, a microwave and a backpack full of batteries,
Della corrected, not looking up from the security tablet she'd somehow already started reprogramming.
The quantum encryption was elegant, but they never considered someone might route a bypass through their automated tea service.
Celeste wasn't sure she understood, but she didn't need to.
I've got a job for you.
Needless to say, Miss Della Knox wasn't hard to convince. But Brick was harder to extract, mainly because the guards were terrified of him. The former gladiator looked like someone had taken a small mountain and taught it to bench press starships. His file was mostly just a list of things he'd punched successfully, including but not limited to a Corvan Warmech, a Thray diplomatic shuttle, and an Ayari logic calculation matrix. The last one was apparently an accident, but the matrix had it coming.
Brick,
Celeste said, by way of introduction.
How'd you like the opportunity of a lifetime to punch some guys worth punching?
Ma'am, Brick replied, his voice a pleasant rumble that sounded like distant thunder having a polite conversation.
It'd be my pleasure.
Sweetie Valine had been harder to find, mainly because she'd already talked her way out of 3 different cells using a combination of charm, blackmail, and what appeared to be weaponized empathy. She looked like someone's favorite cool aunt, if your favorite aunt happened to be a master criminal who could sell ice to a comet and dress like a femme fatale when she could get away with it.
Darling,
she said, somehow making Prison Orange look fashionable.
You must be the woman with the absolutely terrible idea.
Celeste raised an eyebrow.
You've heard about me and my offer already.
Sweetie leaned forward.
There's not much the guards don't tell me about their jobs, their days, their families. I'm only imprisoned because of a misunderstanding, darling, don't you know?
Sweetie winked.
And for the record, I'm in.
The last team member was technically cheating, but Celeste had never been above bending rules when they got in the way of saving civilization. Kix looked human enough, 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head in the regulation position, but his parentage was complicated in the way that only happened when a Thray diplomat fell in love with a human smuggler and decided to make it everyone else's problem. He was wearing a tracksuit, in prison. Somehow, this worked for him.
Right then,
he said, his accent so aggressively London it could have been outlawed by the U.S. government.
I hear we're going to do something proper mental. About bloody time.
Celeste looked at her assembled team of misfits, criminals, and walking disasters and felt something that might have been hope, if it weren't so terrifying to depend on humanity's most rowdy misfits to save the galaxy.
Ladies and gentlemen, she said, let me tell you about Carnus Void.
She paused, her expression growing serious.
One more thing. Della, I need you to set up a data packet. Live feed from whatever surveillance you can hack into, with a dead-drop server as backup. If this goes sideways, the galaxy needs to know what you accomplished.
Della nodded, already thinking through the technical requirements.
Insurance policy? The best kind, Celeste said grimly. The Council can't arrest heroes if the whole galaxy is watching.
Carnus Void wasn't technically a planet, which was probably for the best, since any self-respecting planet would have filed a complaint with the zoning board. It was an asteroid that had been hollowed out, built up, and generally turned into the kind of place your mother warned you about, assuming your mother was the sort who warned you about rough space stations run by criminal syndicates. The place was a vertical maze of black markets, illegal clinics, and establishments that didn't bother advertising what they sold because their customers already knew, and their competitors were afraid to ask. It spun lazily in the debris field of a dead system, surrounded by the kind of background radiation that made most species nervous, and humans feel right at home. Beautiful, Roman said, watching the station grow larger in their stolen freighter's viewport. It's like someone took every bad neighborhood in the galaxy and built them a clubhouse.
Their ship was ostensibly carrying a load of Altarian neural stimulants, highly illegal, extremely valuable, and absolutely guaranteed to get them waved through customs without too many questions. The fact that the stimulants were actually tubes of industrial lubricant mixed with food coloring was the kind of detail that would only matter if someone looked too closely. Fortunately, criminals were generally too busy being criminals to develop good inspection protocols.
Docking control freighter euphemism, crackled the comm. State your business.
Sweetie leaned into the microphone with the kind of smile that could charm a snake out of its skin. Oh, honey, we're just here to make some very bad decisions under the influence and spread the wealth around. Got a hole full of the good stuff and a pressing need to turn it into credits.
Base 7. Try not to blow anything up. Sweetie giggled.
No promises, love.
Brick rolled his eyes. The docking bay smelled like burnt metal and poor life choices. Ronan watched their escort, a trio of Corvan mercenaries who looked like they'd been carved from particularly aggressive granite, and cataloged at least 6 different ways to kill them if things went sideways. Things, he reflected, always went sideways. It was actually a law of physics, if you remembered right. Which he didn't. Was it Marshall's law that stated if anything can go wrong, it will go wrong?
Welcome to the Carnus Void, the lead Corvan growled. His scarred face managed to look bored and homicidal at the same time. Station rules are simple. Don't start fights you can't finish. Don't steal from the Syndicate. Don't ask questions about the big boom everyone's been hearing from level 7.
Maybe it was Martin's law of physics, not Marshall, Ronan thought. No, that still wasn't right. Ah, hell. The name would come to him eventually.
Level 7?
Della asked, with the kind of innocent curiosity that had probably gotten her into trouble since she learned to walk.
Where do they keep the things that go boom? The Corvan replied. Questions about level 7 are the kind that get you spaced, just so we're clear.
Crystal, Ronan said, already mentally updating his mission parameters. Nothing said quantum destabilizer quite like the things that go boom. They split up immediately, which would have been a terrible idea if they were anyone else. But they weren't anyone else. They were humans, which meant they had a genetic predisposition toward making terrible ideas work through sheer bloody-minded determination. Della headed for the tech district, where she immediately found a maintenance droid that was having what could charitably be called an existential crisis. It was a simple cooking unit, designed to prepare approximately 15 different varieties of nutrient paste, and it had apparently become self-aware enough to realize how depressing this was. Oh, you poor thing, Della said, producing a toolkit that shouldn't have fit in her jacket but somehow did. Let's give you something more interesting to do. Plus, I need to piggyback a data feed through their network insurance policy for our boss lady. An hour later, she had a mobile surveillance scrambler that followed her around like a loyal pet, occasionally dispensed snacks, and was quietly streaming encrypted footage to a dead drop server in human space. The cooking droid seemed much happier with its new purpose in life, even if that purpose involved some light electronic warfare and potential journalism. Brilliant cost-cutting, Della explained to the others later. Their military-grade security network uses the same cheap sub-processors as their catering units. It's like they built a back door the size of a planet and marked it lunch menu. Sweetie, meanwhile, had found her way to the Officers Club, where she was systematically charming classified information out of anyone with access cards and flexible ethics. Her target was a Yarvox lieutenant who looked like he'd been hitting the synthetic adrenaline hard enough to make his hand shake. "You know what your problem is, sugar?" she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "You're working too hard. A handsome man like you shouldn't be stressing about work when there's so much life to live."
I can't. The destabilizer. If we don't...
Honey, that's exactly what I mean. You carry the weight of the world on those broad shoulders.
She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper.
Why don't you tell Sweetie all about it? Maybe I can help.
20 minutes later, she had a complete schematic of Level 7 and the lieutenant's access codes. She also had a date for next Tuesday, which she was absolutely not planning to keep, but felt bad about nonetheless. Brick's approach was more direct. He walked into the nearest bar, ordered a drink, and waited for someone to start trouble. This took approximately 4 minutes, which was actually longer than he expected. The trouble came in the form of 3 Nayari mercenaries who'd apparently decided that humans were good for target practice. They'd made the classic mistake of assuming that because Brick was large and quiet, he was slow and stupid. The first one learned otherwise when Brick caught his plasma rifle mid-swing and used it to introduce the second one to the concept of rapid deceleration. The third one was reconsidering his life choices when Brick casually bent his weapon into a pretzel and handed it back to him. "Drinks are on me," Brick announced to the stunned bar, producing a credit stick that definitely hadn't been his when he walked in. "Anyone know where a fellow might find the VIP section?" Meanwhile, Kix was having the time of his life. Growing up half-human on Earth had given him a unique perspective on the galaxy, namely that most of it was far too serious and could benefit from a good laugh. The Yarvox guards were used to intimidating people through sheer menace, but they weren't quite sure what to do with someone who kept offering them tea and asking about the weather. "Lovely station you got here," he said to a particularly surly guard, somehow making it sound like genuine admiration. "Very atmospheric. That whole 'we'll murder you in your sleep' vibe really ties the place together." The guard blinked slowly, trying to process whether he'd just been insulted or complimented. Kix used the confusion to palm his access card and keep walking. "Cheers, mate. Love what you've done with the place." Ronan, for his part, had found the express route to Level 7, up the service elevator shaft, through the waste recycling system, and into a maintenance tunnel that smelled like regret and industrial solvent. It was the kind of route that would have killed anyone who'd bothered to think about it first. He met up with the others in a storage room that was technically supposed to be full of cleaning supplies, but was actually full of enough illegal weapons to arm a small revolution. To hell with Magnar's Law, or whatever it was called. Things were actually going pretty well. "Right," he said, checking his improvised map against Sweetie's stolen schematics. "Good news is we found the destabilizer. Bad news is it's in the middle of the most heavily guarded section of the station, surrounded by enough firepower to vaporize a moon."
What's the worst news?
Della asked, already knowing there was worse news because there was always worse news. "It's going to detonate in 6 hours, not 72. Ronan's face was casual, despite the drastic time limit change. I found the real countdown timer. The bastards were running a decoy feed on the public networks. They wanted everyone to think we had more time.
Classic misdirection,
Sweetie said.
keep the authorities thinking they have time to plan while you finish the job.
Kix whistled softly. Bloody hell. That's what I call a deadline. Can we disarm it? Brick asked, with the calm practicality of someone who'd faced improbable odds before and usually won through judicious application of violence. Della was already pulling up the technical specifications on her tablet.
Maybe. It's a quantum destabilizer, which means it's essentially a very large bomb that explodes in 11 dimensions simultaneously. The good news is, I can probably overload it. The bad news is, overloading it will make it explode in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Maybe it was Mackenzie's law that says anything that can go wrong will go wrong.
How long? Ronan asked.
20 minutes of prep work, then I'll need maybe 30 seconds to arm the final sequence when we're ready to run. So we're back to the evacuation plan,
Sweetie said.
Get everyone off the station before it goes boom.
Can't, Roman said grimly. The destabilizer isn't just going to destroy the station. It's designed to punch a hole in space-time itself. The quantum cascade will propagate through the central galactic net's entanglement links. Every major system in the galaxy goes dark. They sat in silence for a moment, contemplating the end of civilization as they knew it.
Well,
Kix said cheerfully.
at least we won't have to worry about the paperwork.
Ronan snapped his fingers. It's Murphy's Law! That's it! Everyone looked at him like he was crazy, which he was. The security around Level 7 was designed by people who understood that the best defense was multiple layers of things that could kill you in increasingly creative ways. There were guards, turrets, force fields, and what appeared to be a Nayari combat AI that had been programmed to be deeply suspicious of anything that moved, breathed, or existed. It should have been impregnable. Unfortunately for the Yarvok Syndicate, it had been designed by people who thought rationally about problems, and they were facing humans. Della's cooking droid turned surveillance scrambler cleared the way, happily jamming every sensor in a 50-meter radius, while occasionally offering people sandwiches. The guards couldn't see them coming, and the turrets couldn't lock on to targets that didn't technically exist, according to their sensors. Sweetie talked their way past the checkpoint by convincing the on-duty officer that they were health inspectors, there to make sure the Doomsday device met proper safety standards. The fact that this was arguably true made the lie easier to sell. Brick handled the combat AI by challenging it to an arm-wrestling match. The AI, programmed to respond to threats with overwhelming force, was completely unprepared for someone who wanted to resolve conflict through friendly competition. By the time it realized this was a tactical error, Brick had already disconnected its primary processing unit and thanked it for a good game. Sportsmanship, he explained to the others. It's all about sportsmanship. Kix provided Overwatch, which mostly involved offering running commentary on their progress in a voice that made it sound like they were playing a particularly entertaining game of cricket rather than breaking into a terrorist base. Oh, well played, Della. Lovely bit of electronic warfare there. And Sweetie, that was absolutely magnificent. I don't think I've ever seen someone lie with such artistic flair. Which left Ronan free to do what he did best: adapt, improvise, and overcome through the application of creative violence and weaponized stubbornness. The quantum destabilizer was beautiful in the way that terrible things often were. A sphere of funky and headache-inducing geometry that hurt to look at directly, surrounded by enough exotic matter to power a small star. It sat in the center of a room that was part laboratory, part shrine, and part monument to the kind of thing that led to genocidal megalomania. It's bigger than I expected, Della said, already putting out her tools and getting to work on the preliminary overload sequence. That's what she said, Kix muttered, earning a glare from Sweetie. Focus, people, Ronan said, though he was fighting a smile. Della, status? Give me 15 more minutes of prep, then I'll be ready to arm the final sequence, she said, hands flying over her tablet as she worked. After that, we'll have about 3 minutes to get clear. And us?
We want to be somewhere else when it happens, preferably in a different star system.
The new voice cut through their planning session like a plasma blade through butter.
I am afraid that's not going to be possible.
They turned to find themselves facing the business end of enough weapons to level the city block, held by a mix of Corvan muscle and Nayari precision that spelled trouble in any language. At their head was a figure in expensive armor that had been polished to mirror brightness. Classic villain presentation. The kind that said, I have minions, and I'm not afraid to use them.
Humans,
the figure said, his voice carrying the kind of disappointment usually reserved for children who'd been caught stealing cookies.
I had hoped the reports were exaggerated. The space is barely out of its own gravity well, thinking it could match wits with the Arvox Syndicate.
Yeah, well, Ronan said, casually positioning himself between the speaker and Della. We've always been overachievers. Who do I have the pleasure of shooting?
I am Valakai, second director of operations, and you're about to learn why the Syndicate has never failed to complete a mission.
The Arvox leader's armor shifted, revealing additional weapon systems that were definitely not standard issue.
Your species' reputation for chaos is well documented, but chaos without purpose is just noise.
See, that's where you're wrong, Ronan said, his hand drifting toward his sidearm. Our chaos has plenty of purpose. We just don't bother explaining it to people who wouldn't understand.
Enlighten me.
The purpose, Ronan said, is that while you were explaining why we're doomed, Della just armed the final sequence. Valakai spun toward the destabilizer just in time to see Della step back from the device, her face lit by the warm glow of cascading quantum failure.
Overload initiated,
she announced cheerfully.
Estimated time to catastrophic containment failure? 3 minutes and counting.
You pathetic cretins! You won't get away with this! Valakai raised his weapon, but Brick was already moving. The big man crossed the room in 3 strides, caught the Arvox leader around the waist, and introduced him to the far wall with enough force to leave a crater. Sportsmanship, Brick said again, though this time it sounded less friendly. What followed was the kind of running firefight that would have made tactical instructors weep openly. The humans moved like a unit that had been fighting together for years instead of hours, covering each other's backs and communicating through a combination of hand signals, shouted insults, and what could only be described as aggressive telepathy. Sweetie produced a pair of plasma pistols from somewhere in her prison uniform and began what she called aggressive negotiations with the Corvan mercenaries. Kix turned out to be surprisingly handy with the crowbar, using it to redirect enemy fire and occasionally to redirect enemy faces. Della kept one eye on her tablet, monitoring the destabilizer's cascade failure, while using her other eye to guide her cooking droid bodyguard through what appeared to be an improvised dance routine that left unconscious guards in its wake. Ronan fought like a man who'd been professionally violent for most of his adult life, which was exactly what he was. He moved through the enemy formation like a shark through chum, leaving a trail of unconscious bodies and disabled weapons systems.
2 minutes,
Della called out, just as the lights began to flicker ominously.
Exit strategy?
Sweetie asked, somehow managing to sound calm while pistol whipping a Nayari assassin. Working on it, Ronan replied, doing something complicated with his multi-tool and a wall panel that resulted in a shower of sparks and the sound of very expensive security systems having nervous breakdowns. The maintenance shaft he'd found led to the docking bay, which was currently full of very confused criminals trying to figure out why all the lights were flashing red and why the station's public address system was playing what sounded like a Terran death metal concert.
1 minute,
Della announced. They reached the docking bay to find their freighter exactly where they'd left it, which was a small miracle. Unfortunately, it was also surrounded by enough Yarvox security to start their own small war.
Plan B?
Kix asked, sounding remarkably calm for someone who was about to be vaporized in 11 dimensions. What makes you think we had a plan A? Ronan asked, then grinned. Brick, you know how to fly one of those? He was pointing at a Yarvox assault shuttle that was sleek, fast, and heavily armed. It was also locked, guarded, and definitely not supposed to be operated by humans.
Does it have buttons? Brick asked. Is it a stick shift or automatic?
Lots of buttons. Stick shift. Brick cracked his knuckles.
Then I can fly it.
Brick proved that knowing how to fly was a flexible concept that could be interpreted as knowing how to make things go in the direction you wanted through the application of raw determination and percussive maintenance. This type of flexible concept usually resulted in a lot of property damage. The assault shuttle had a sophisticated flight control system that was designed to be intuitive to any trained pilot. Unfortunately, it had not been designed for someone who'd learned to fly by crashing stolen spacecraft until they stopped crashing, and who treated manual controls as a polite suggestion rather than a requirement.
Wait,
Kick said, looking at the control layout with sudden recognition.
this is based on 3 design principles. Off my genetics, remember this.
He started flipping switches in a chaotic but seemingly effective pattern.
Mum was a diplomat, remember? Spent half my childhood in shuttles like this.
Engines are supposed to make that noise? Sweetie asked as the ship suddenly ran much smoother.
Now they are, Kick said with satisfaction. Proper engineering, this. None of that human duct tape nonsense.
Probably not, Brick admitted, doing something to the control panel that involved hitting it with his fist until it displayed the readings he wanted. But they're making it louder, which means they're working harder. The shuttle lurched down to the docking bay just as the quantum destabilizer reached critical failure. The cascade was visible from space, a sphere of strange, unnatural light that expanded for a moment before collapsing in on itself, taking most of Level 7 with it. Behind them, Karna's void convulsed like a living thing in pain. The station's structure, held together by a combination of engineering and wishful thinking, began to buckle as the quantum cascade propagated through its power grid.
Beautiful,
Ronan said, watching the station tear itself apart in the rear viewer.
Nothing quite like the sight of a terrorist headquarters having a proper meltdown. 30 seconds until the station goes critical, Della reported,
monitoring the cascade failure on her tablet.
The quantum distortion is going to make this entire sector unnavigable for the next century.
Good thing we're leaving, Kick said, then paused.
We are leaving, right?
That's when the proximity alarm started screaming.
Pursuit craft,
Sweetie announced, checking the scanner readings.
3 of them, closing fast. They look upset.
Can't imagine why, Ronan said, taking the gunner's position. Brick, how fast can this thing go? Fast enough, Brick said, doing something to the engines that made them roar like angry gods. But they're faster. The pursuit craft were sleek, deadly, and piloted by professionals who spent their entire careers learning how to kill people in space. They were also predictable, which was their first mistake. The second mistake was assuming that humans would run in a straight line. Brick put the shuttle into a corkscrew dive that would have caused anyone with a functioning sense of self-preservation to go brain dead. He threaded the needle between chunks of debris from the dying station. The pursuit craft followed, their pilots confident in their superior training and equipment. They were still confident when Ronan started shooting. Human weapons technology wasn't as advanced as most alien systems, but it had one advantage. It had been designed by people who understood that the best way to win a fight was to make the other guy stop fighting by any means necessary. Where alien weapons were precise, clean, and efficient, human weapons were loud, messy, and extremely enthusiastic about their work. The first pursuit craft learned this when Ronan's cannon fire turned its starboard engine into abstract art. The second one discovered it when a spread of micro-missiles convinced its pilot that today was a good day to be somewhere else. The third one was closing in for the kill when Della's cooking droid, somehow still functioning despite being in a zero-G environment it was never designed for, managed to interface with the shuttle's defensive systems and started dispensing electronic warfare along with snacks. The pursuing craft's targeting system had a complete breakdown, switching between identifying the shuttle as a hostile target, a breakfast menu, and a small household appliance. By the time the pilot sorted out the confusion, they were too far away to matter. Nicely done, everyone, Ronan said, settling back in his seat as the shuttle cleared the debris field. Now let's go home and collect our pardons. That's when Sweetie checked the communication array and delivered the news that no one wanted to hear.
Bad news, darlings. we've got a priority message from the Galactic Council.
She patched it through to the main display, where the stern face of Minister Quanvix appeared, looking even more constipated than usual.
Attention, human operatives.
The Thray Minister began, his marble-pale features radiating bureaucratic displeasure.
While the Council acknowledges your success in preventing the quantum cascade, your unauthorized methods have created an unacceptable precedent. If we allow rogue operations to supersede established protocols, the very foundation of galactic order will collapse. A council security team is en route to take you into custody for debriefing and appropriate sanctions.
The message cut off, leaving them in silence. Well, Kix said after a moment, that's a bit rich, isn't it? Thanks for saving civilization. Now get in the cage so we can pretend it never happened. Don't worry, Ronan said, though his grin had acquired a sharp edge. I've got a plan.
Please tell me it doesn't involve more explosions,
Della said. Not directly. The diplomatic immunity was a Thray cruiser, all flowing lines and polished surfaces designed to look peaceful and sophisticated. It was also armed with enough firepower to sterilize a continent, because diplomacy was always more effective when backed by the threat of orbital bombardment. Commander Yazid was a career diplomat who spent 30 years perfecting the art of solving problems through careful negotiation and mutual respect. He was also deeply regretting his decision to volunteer for this mission. "Human vessel," he transmitted. "You are ordered to stand down and prepare to be boarded. Compliance is not optional." The response came back immediately, the voice of someone who sounded like he was enjoying himself far too much. Thray vessel diplomatic immunity. This is Captain Ronan Holt of the recently liberated Yarvok's assault shuttle, Sweet Revenge. I'm afraid we're going to have to decline your invitation to surrender. Captain Holt, you are in violation of, interstellar law, due process, proper procedure, blah, blah, blah. I've heard it all before. Ronan's voice carried the kind of confidence that came from setting things on fire and watching them burn. Here's the thing, Commander. We just saved your entire civilization from a quantum cascade that would have sent you back to the Stone Age. Now you want to arrest us for it? We completed the mission you asked us to do. No takesies backsies. Your methods were unauthorized. The Council cannot... The Council can kiss my ass, Ronan interrupted cheerfully. You want to know what our methods were? We walked into an impossible, even suicidally deadly situation, figured out how to make it work, and got the job done, while your people were still forming committees to discuss whether it was possible. Commander Yazid felt a headache building behind his eyes. Captain, please be reasonable. The law is clear. The law is stupid, Ronan said. And so is anyone who thinks following it is more important than saving lives. Now, unless you want us to show you why we got into prison, I suggest you keep your word on that immunity promise. That's when Della's voice cut into the transmission. Sweet as honey and twice as dangerous.
Commander, you might want to check your news feeds before you do anything hasty.
Yazid frowned, gesturing to his communications officer. A moment later, his face went pale as he read the incoming reports. The story was everywhere. Every news service, every social network, every communication channel in human space was carrying the same footage. Security camera recordings from Karnas Void showing 5 humans walking into a terrorist stronghold and casually dismantling the most dangerous weapon in galactic history. The commentary was even worse. From a diplomatic perspective, human citizens were calling their representatives. Human media was having a field day, and human military officers were making pointed statements about the effectiveness of human problem-solving techniques compared to alien bureaucratic processes. Oh dear, Commander Yazid said softly.
That's right, Commander.
Sweetie's voice joined the conversation.
warm and friendly, and absolutely terrifying in its implications.
Public opinion is a beautiful thing, isn't it? Especially when it's running in your favor.
This is blackmail, Hasid said weakly.
This is democracy, Ronan corrected. The people have spoken, and what they're saying is that maybe the folks who actually solve the problem shouldn't be punished for doing it. God bless democracy. Hasid looked at his tactical display, where the human shuttle sat motionless in space, apparently content to wait for him to make the next move. He thought about his orders, his career, and the 17 different ways this situation could end his professional life. Then he thought about the alternative. Stand down, weapons, he ordered his tactical officer. Communications. Get me a direct line to Ambassador Gray. The conversation that followed would become legendary in diplomatic circles, mainly because it was the first time in recorded history that a council security operation had been called off due to what the official report described as unforeseen political complications arising from effective mission completion. Ambassador Celeste Gray, reached at her office on Earth, had listened to Commander Yazid's explanation with the kind of patience that came from years of dealing with bureaucratic disasters. Commander, she said finally, let me see if I understand the situation. The Council is so terrified that humans proved their rules don't matter that they want to arrest the people who saved the galaxy. The law is clear, Ambassador. Unauthorized military action. The law is also clear about the right of self-defense, Celeste interrupted. And I'm pretty sure preventing the collapse of galactic civilization counts as self-defense. Her voice took on a dangerous edge. But this isn't about law, is it, Commander? This is about fear. The Council can't admit that 5 human criminals succeeded where their entire bureaucratic machine failed. But the Council, Celeste said, is about to learn why trying to punish competence is a losing strategy when the competent people have just become galactic heroes. Commander Yazid was quiet for a long moment. What do you suggest, Ambassador? I suggest you escort our people home, thank them for their service, and pretend this conversation never happened. And if the Council objects? Celeste's smile was audible through the comm channel. Commander, have you ever tried to argue with a human mob that thinks you're being ungrateful? No, Ambassador. Trust me, you don't want to start now. The Sweet Revenge docked at Luna Station 12 hours later, escorted by the diplomatic immunity and followed by approximately 30 different news drones that had been tracking their journey home. The docking bay was packed with reporters, politicians, and what appeared to be half the human population of the solar system. Ronan stepped off the shuttle first, still wearing his prison uniform and looking like he'd spent the last day fighting for his life, which was exactly what he'd been doing. The crowd erupted in cheers that could probably be heard on Mars.
Captain Holt,
shouted a reporter, shoving a microphone in his face.
How does it feel to have saved the galaxy?
Ronan looked at the microphone, then at the crowd, then at his teammates, who were grinning like they'd just won the lottery. It feels, he said, like we're just getting started. Behind him, Della was already signing autographs with her multi-tool. Brick was having a philosophical discussion with a group of children about the proper way to punch things, and Sweetie was charming a group of politicians who looked like they weren't sure whether to arrest her or offer her a job. Kix, meanwhile, was holding court with a group of reporters explaining in great detail how proper criminal methodology was really just problem-solving with more enthusiasm. The thing you have to understand, he was saying, is that humans don't just break rules. We break them creatively. It's an art form. Ambassador Gray appeared at Ronan's elbow, somehow managing to look both diplomatic and smug at the same time. Congratulations, Captain, she said. You're officially pardoned, rich, and famous.
How does it feel?
Like I need a drink and a vacation, Ronan said. Not necessarily in that order.
I'm afraid the vacation will have to wait. Celeste handed him a datapad. I have another job for you.
Ronan looked at the pad, his grin widening as he read the details. Pirates in the Vega system. Ambassador, you're spoiling me.
They're not just pirates, Captain. They're pirates with a planet killer and a grudge against the galactic shipping lanes.
Even better. Ronan looked at his team, who were already gravitating toward him with the kind of anticipation that came from people who'd found their calling. What do you say, people? Feel like committing some more crimes for the good of the galaxy?
Do we get to keep the ship?
Della asked, patting the Sweet Revenge affectionately.
The ship, the weapons, and anything else you can carry.
Well then, Sweetie said, somehow making it sound like she was accepting an invitation to tea rather than a suicide mission.
I suppose we better get to work.
As they walked back toward their stolen ship, Ronan felt something that might have been contentment, if it weren't so dangerous. They weren't heroes. They were human wrecking balls who'd learned morality the hard way. But maybe that's exactly what the galaxy needed. After all, when the universe presented you with a mighty dangerous problem, sometimes the best solution was to find someone too stupid to know it was impossible. And humans, Ronan reflected, had never been accused of being too smart for their own good. So, Kik said, bouncing on his heels with enthusiasm, what do we blow up next? Everything, Roman said, and meant it. We blow up everything that needs blown up, fix everything that needs fixing, and break everything that needs breaking. He laughed a little maniacally, which was only slightly concerning. And if someone objects? Brick asked. Ronan's grin was sharp enough to cut steel. Then we'll explain to them why they're wrong. Loudly. The Sweet Revenge lifted off from Luna Station 20 minutes later, heading for the outer system and whatever trouble was waiting for them there. Behind them, Earth spun in its orbit, blue and green and beautiful in the way that only home could be. And in the depths of space, something that might have been the universe itself seemed to chuckle, as if it had just remembered the punchline to a very long joke. After all, it had spent billions of years evolving the perfect problem-solving species. It would be a shame not to give them some proper problems to solve.